Good morning everybody and welcome back to Friday Art Class with me, Adrian Margie. Over the past couple of weeks we have been exploring some of Northern Ireland's most iconic landmarks and places. Last week we painted Mussenden Temple, the week before we painted Dunluce Castle, and I've been so impressed by the way in which you have been taking on board my ideas of colour mixing and simplifying form. This week we're going to continue to explore my contemporary style, but we're going to look at the concepts of texture and block colour. I'll be using acrylic paint again this week. It's great for building up layers and textures. I know many of you won't have access to acrylic paint at home, so please do continue to work with your watercolours, your markers, your crayons, your poster paint. I would suggest if you want to experiment with the texture, in the absence of acrylic paint, maybe try and get your hands on some string, some PVA glue, so that you can mirror and emulate what I'll be doing with my acrylic paint. The subject matter for this week's demonstration is going to be the Giant's Causeway stones. Now the Giant's Causeway is an area of more than 40,000 interlocking basalt columns, a really incredible site that came about as a result of an ancient volcanic eruption. The tops of the columns form stepping stones which lead from the bottom of the cliffs and disappear down under the sea. So breaking the canvas into thirds again, both vertically and horizontally. The top third is going to be given over to the sky. The middle third is going to have some sea and it's going to contain the outcropping of the causeway columns. And then the bottom third is going to be given over to the stepping stones. Again, this needs to be quite loose at the moment. You just want to get the general shape. I don't like to put in too many details into my sketches because, essentially I'm going to be painting over them and it can become quite difficult to see your sketches. So as I say, just the basic outline and maybe some of the key contours that you want to capture. I probably would focus more on the foreground, sketching in the interconnecting hexagonal columns. That would be a good help for you whenever you come to paint. Okay, so that's the sketch complete. I'm just going to flash up a version of the sketch that I've done with a black marker. Hopefully you can see that better. It will give you an idea of the composition of my piece. Before we actually start to paint the piece, we're going to add the texture, okay? We're going to start by outlining the outlines with paint. Might sound a bit odd, but the way I do that is I use some white acrylic paint with a nozzle. So it's going to be a little bit like icing a cake. I'm going to show you what I mean here. Now please don't panic if you don't have acrylic paint and you don't have a nozzle or a syringe. Perhaps get some string. You could use some string and PVA glue and use the string to outline a few of the stones, a few of those hexagonal shapes, just to create a little bit of raised texture. Maybe use a bit of string here and there just to highlight the columns. You see how that could give a similar effect. So this is very much the base layer. If you're finding it a bit fiddly with the string, again, please don't worry. We're living in strange times where we don't have access to materials, and I understand that. So this is purely to give you an insight into how I create my pieces. So there we have the columns and the stones outlined with paint. What I also like to do at this stage is to add a little bit of paint just onto the stepping stones, just to suggest the texture of the stones themselves. This becomes effective whenever we go to add the coloured layer on top. So this initial layer of paint can take quite some time to dry, many hours in fact. So I'm going to speed up the process a little with the hairdryer. Okay, so I'm going to leave that for a little while just to dry by itself. It's really important that the paint solidifies and it's totally firm before we move on to the next step in the painting, which is adding the colour. In the past couple of sessions we have looked a lot at colour mixing and colour blending, but in this session I want to experiment with colour blocking. And colour blocking is where you take different colours from opposite ends of the colour wheel and pair them to make interesting and contrasting colour combinations. Mondrian was one of the first artists that popularised this whole concept. He was a Dutch artist in the 1930s, where he took vibrant colour and he separated them with very thick black outlines. So in this piece we're going to take on some of those ideas of using just solid blocks of colour to create a very vibrant and lively piece. Whenever I paint the Causeway stones, I can't help but think about that ancient volcanic explosion and all of the lava flows. And all of the imagery in my mind is about warm, vibrant colour, and that very much will inform my choice of colour in this piece. So we're going to start with a really solid red sky. I want to have one big block of red at the top of the canvas. No colour mixing or blending required here. There we have a vibrant stripe of red representing the sky. Now we're going to insert a block of pale blue to represent the cooling waters around the stones. So mixing up some cerulean blue and a little bit of white to create this pale blue colour. So there we have very strong, solid blocks of red and blue, which are going to act as a backdrop to the Causeway stones and a multiplicity of contrasting colours. I'm going to start with a dark blue, just to introduce some form, to bring out some of the key shapes of the columns. I'm going to add in some purple and lilac tones now. for the stepping stones. In this kind of a piece, you're really building up layers of colour and layers of contrast. So I find it quite therapeutic. You hopefully will as well. Back to the idea of the lava flows, I'm going to introduce a lot of reds and oranges and yellows into the Causeway stones now. So there we have it, lots of blocks of colour. All these contrasting colours sitting side by side really give this piece a sense of life and energy. And you can see how the textured lines separate the colours at the moment. Next we're going to use those dark outlines to emphasise the separation of the colours, to create even more of a contrast. You might just want to refresh your water at this point. Again, mine gets very muddy at this stage, so before I apply the dark brown paint, I just changed my water. Some brown and ultramarine blue, a dark blue, to create that very dark brown colour that we're going to use to outline the causeway stones and the columns, and just to give greater separation. If you've watched the previous classes, you'll know that I use a very fine brush called a rigger for these black outlines. If you don't have a fine brush like this, perhaps try a marker. It may take some time to outline all of the hexagonal stones and the columns, but just give yourself some quiet time, lose yourself in the landscape, and just really enjoy exploring the landscape through new eyes. And to finish off, I'm going to use some white paint, again using my rigger brush, just to pick out some of the raised texture in the piece. there we have it, my contemporary depiction of the giant's Causeway stones. So just to recap, today we explored the concepts of texture and colour blocking. I showed you how I introduced texture into my work by piping the paint on and letting that dry and solidify before adding colour on top. We also explored the work of Dutch artist Mondrian and how he divided vibrant and contrasting colours with a dark outline to create a very lively image. And we took those ideas on board and integrated them into landscape painting and into this depiction of the Causeway stones. I must say I've really enjoyed working with you all over the past few weeks, and I've loved seeing your interpretations of my work, so please do keep sending them through. This is the last session for a little while. I'm going to be back with a couple of other painting demonstrations in the middle of next term, hoping to give you an insight into my more traditional style, which uses naturalistic colours and aspects of Impressionism. In the meantime, I've got some homework for you. I would love for as many of you as possible to get involved in the collaborative art project that I talked about in my first lesson. The idea being, I know many of us are missing our friends and our favourite places, and I've been trying to think of a way that we can connect. So I would love you all to get a piece of A4 paper or card, draw a hexagon. So taking inspiration from the Causeway stones, you cut that out and you're left with a Causeway stone shaped canvas on which I'd like you to paint your favourite place. The idea, whenever this is all over, we can connect everyone's stones together to create a massive collaborative art piece, almost like a huge tapestry of our favourite places. So maybe have a look on my website on adrianmarkey.com. There's hundreds of images on there of places that I have painted over the years. I'd like it if you could take on board some of the techniques that we have learned over the past few weeks. Here's some photographs of James and Anna from Belfast, who have already started to create their individual Causeway stones. I think their work looks fantastic. Just imagine this on a massive scale. So why not have a go over the Easter holidays, paint your favourite place on a hexagonal piece of card or paper. And whenever this whole situation is over, let's join them together to create one huge art piece. Alright, so enjoy your homework and have a great Easter break. Take care.